Hi, Erín Moure here,
Oana Avasilichioaei.
and we're here to talk to you today about Juana's most recent book, which came out late last fall from TalonBooks. It's called Chamber Sonic. Welcome, Juana, and thanks very much
Thank you,
for
Erin.
joining me for 4 questions. I really had an amazing time reading this book. I knew that there was some sound pieces, that some of the pieces I could just use my phone and listen to them. But I wanted to read it first as a book. I really thought it's a book. I'm going to read it as a conventional book. But then I found like partway through, I couldn't resist. I had to click on those sound links, and I ended up going back and clicking on the ones that I had missed because it kind of changed my relationship. It was like the room, a whole new room jumped out of the book, and I was in a whole new space in relation with the book. There was a kind of new and richer dimensionality. It was like when you're a kid and you open a pop-up book and it's like, holy cow. And so this made me think of my first question, which is about how goes around. It's kind of around how poetry can be accessible, and by that I mean accessibility for people who can't see or hear, or who have sensory differences or difficulties. And I wanted to ask you then: is the accessibility of poetry in this sense something that the experience of having written Chamber Sonic brought you closer to, or made you think about more?
Definitely, I think like in the future, in the next, whatever I work on next, I think there are more possibilities I can explore in how haptic, digital, maybe ways of how to bring out some of the works in the book. Um, but as it stands, the book nonetheless, or a book, it's kind of a book album, and it makes poetry accessible at least through two senses, hearing and sight, and arguably perhaps even haptically as well, as the mouth, the breath, the voice are evoked a lot, or are embodied a lot in words and in sound. And this might encourage some kind of imaginative transfer to the reader's or listener's own mouth and vocal apparatus.
Oh, that is so cool. I like that. I find that's true. I find also with the images just that there's, I think of Deleuze talking about the haptic aspect to sight, that sight can seize things as if through touch, and some of the images make me do that.
Right, right.
Just a side note. In any case, the second question is that chamber sonic in itself textually doesn't describe the emotional life of a speaker, of the speaker, although it does indicate emotional valences. And of course, sound provokes affective or emotional responses in humans, as do colors, as in this amazing graphic score I see as alphabetic. So I found it overall, I guess, an amazing experience to effectively receive this book. And it's very different than a lot of other works, because some people, or many people, expect poetry to be a tool for expiating emotion. So I wanted to ask you about emotional life and text sound relations, and how you take them into account in composing textually.
I think emotion can be evoked and elicited in many ways through the propulsion and tempo of sound, of some, but not just that, but also through the propulsion and tempo of the forms of the words themselves, through humor, through color, intellectual stimulation. I find that can be emotionally,
Oh, yes.
effective. The topographies of the page, and certainly through sound. I'm very much committed to creating ambiences or moments or experiences of time, echoes, palimpsests, that do have an expressive energy with an emotional impact. And I think sound can be particularly emotionally powerful because we experience it not so much through meaning, through what it means, but through how it physically impacts our bodies.
Thanks you for that. And speaking of the body, in a way, for my third question, the body is a chamber, yeah, a sonic chamber, because we're kind of like guitars, and reading and listening to the works in chamber sonic in a way, at least in my experience as a reader, it's a way of activating my sonic chamber in relation to the text and also in relation to the room or space that I'm in while I'm reading. And just wanted to ask you, what is behind or was behind your use of chamber and sonic in the title?
Thank you for that question. It is intended to evoke both how sound and voices move through various types of chambers, bodies, organs, various types of rooms, small or large spaces, as well as social constructs, which I think can be types of enclosures. And
yes,
and also how much these kind of chambers shape, determine, limit, make possible what the sounds and the voices can do, what they can become, what they can be transformed into. There's also a nod to chamber music, of course. But one of the other things is that the book is very much concerned with process, with how something becomes, with an action of a transformation.
Okay.
Which I feel is important to explore in our contemporary moment, where we are very much focused on products and result, the immediate, the moment. And I think of an echo chamber, which is both an enclosed space where sound reverberates, which means that it's constantly changing and in the act of transforming.
Right.
But it also means an environment in which a person encounters confirmation of their own beliefs, and so they're resistant to change, or alternative ideas aren't considered. So by fusing chamber and sonic, I kind of created a different type of a reverberation of this concept, and where I wish to nod to the echo chamber as a space of process, but also to subvert this idea that of being resistant to change, to difference.
That's very helpful. I hope a lot of people read the book, Chamber Sonic, folks, just for that. I have one more question. We can fit our fourth question in. We know that, just taking off from what you were saying, we know that sound energy can affect our cells, all our cells, and it doesn't need to enter our consciousness via the cerebral cortex through what we know as the processes of thought and of forming words. Sound hits us directly through the ear or through the body via vibration. Is sound a form of thought?
Excellent question. Through my exploring and working with sound in the past 10, 15 years, I feel it's had a profound impact on my ways of thinking.
Yes,
in the act of attending to sound, I experience a kind of enhanced metabolization of the present moment. The moment becomes hyper present, even if as it's always about to pass or it's always about to be, it is more present. Keep on spinning. Voices will one day ignite and spill over. They will not retract, but keep on spilling. And sound can create other temporalities of thinking, make thinking less linear instead of a successive series of language-produced thought, which is tend how we think in the logic of language. My thoughts when I'm in sound can be layered or superimposed or simultaneous even, and not all expressed through words. Making sound activates different parts of my brain and the body at the same time, because one hand might be doing something, one hand might be doing something else, my mouth might be doing something else again, my eyes might be looking somewhere else.
That happens to me too.
Yet instead of creating a kind of absent-mindedness through this multi present moment, I feel like sound creates an expansive, amplified, focused mindfulness, actually, which extends beyond the cerebral cortex to the whole body. I've discovered I can, in a way, think with my hands. or with other parts of my body.
That's so great. Well, thank you. And you can go and find Chamber Sonic in your friendly bookstore at the library. Thank you very much. I'm
Thank you,
Erín Moure.
Oana Avasilichioaei.